success is as much driven by intensity and passion, and if you have an idea that you're passionate about, that just increases the probability of success.
Welcome to Divot, the community for people trying to make their mark in the world, where each week I sit down with the greatest minds in business, tech, and sports, and entertainment to uncover the moments, decisions, and lessons that shape their journey, so you can shape yours. Go to divot.org to learn more. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.
Divot.
Known as the father of the video game industry, Nolan Bushnell founded Atari, launching iconic games like Pong, Asteroids, and Space Invaders. In 1977, he also created ChuckECheese, blending entertainment, family, and food in a way that has delighted generations of kids across the world. A serial entrepreneur, visionary, and innovator, Nolan has founded more than 20 companies and mentored countless founders, including being Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak's boss at Atari. He's helped shape the way we think about creativity, play, and technology. He's the author of 2 books, Finding the Next Steve Jobs, and more recently, Shaping the Future of Education, the Exodexa Manifesto, which outlines how schools can help solve the educational crisis through gaming and personalization. Today, we get to hear from a man who's been at the intersection of fun and innovation for over 5 decades. I hope you enjoy it. 50 years almost after you started ChuckECheese, you walk through the doors. Tell us what that feels like to have something that you created from nothing with a small group of really talented people, that all these years later, it's still creating fun and impact in people's lives.
It's, if you do something for kids, it's kind of a cheat, because there's new kids every year. And so it may be old to me, but it's really brand new to them. And I think that we still, when I say we, I think ChuckECheese still has a special spot for things that families can do together. There are many things that are divisive to families. And I think ChuckECheese is something that you can have fun with your folks.
It's sort of one of the greatest names of a brand, I think. But it wasn't going to be ChuckECheese. How did you get that name?
It was actually by my marketing department. It started out Coyote Pizza. And I thought I bought a coyote costume, but it was a rat's costume. And because I knew my engineers could make it move, but
this was for like the animatronic,
right,
basically the band.
We didn't have any sculptors. So I thought I'll just do a cheat and I'll buy a costume at an amusement show. And, I got a walk around costume and sent it to the guys. Says, have you got the coyote talking yet? And they said, it's not a coyote. He said, huh? Not a coyote? He said, no, it's a rat. It's got a big pink tail. And I said, oh, okay. Rick Rat's Pizza. And then I went to the marketing guys and they say, you can't name a restaurant after a rat. This is because rats are dirty and you'll fail the health test department and all that. Well, can it be a rat, but just we'll de-emphasize the ratness? And I said, well, maybe. And I said, okay, I want a happy name. And a week later, we had a staff meeting and they said, we've got the perfect name, 3-smile name. I said, 3-smile name? How do you do that? They said, ChuckECheese. It's a 3-smile name.
When you think about your process for making something that's fun, I find like engineering fun to be one of the hardest problems to solve, and you have seemed to do it over and over again. What do you do? Where do you start?
Well, I think I've been blessed by having a 14-year-old mind trapped in an adult's body. And I think that I grew up being a prankster. And I think pranks and irreverence are a sort of part of a, messing with life is kind of a good thing. I think that it's kind of a pathway to having fun. And I think that I think that it's kind of just the way my brain is built. I like to solve problems. I love puzzles and games. I play Go every day. I play chess with my kids. It's really fun. When you teach your kids chess and they, and you beat them and you beat them and you beat them, and finally they beat you when you didn't throw the game for them.
Yeah.
And my wife used to say, it'd be easier. I said, no. When they beat me fair and square, that will be important. If I throw a game for them, they'll know it. And that doesn't work. You got to give them that rite of passage of beating their dad. The one thing I don't ever do with my kids anymore is wrestle with them. There's a time when your son gets to about 14, they think that it'd be fun to wrestle their dad. And I was able to take him, but I had pain for the next 3 weeks. So I'm never doing it again. So even though I got 5 sons, I only wrestled once, the oldest.
What are the small details that sometimes people overlook with making something fun?
I think that that there's kind of short fun and long fun. And if you try to do short fun in a long form, it doesn't work. And if you try to do long fun in a short form, it doesn't work. What do I mean? Sometimes long fun is just repetition. For example, every time we would go by a cemetery, I'd say to the kids, do you know that people are dying to get in there? and fine. Second time, Dad, he's told us that before. Third time, oh, come on, Dad, Fourth time, they're the first ones. Hey, Dad, did you know they're dying to get in there?
How much of the building process for you is iterative versus this inspiration that maybe is just innately in you? Is it feedback from customers? Is it yourself just trying it and you kind of know where the right place is?
I think editing and iterative is good. There's a lot of people that have done some really great things and didn't really know what to do with them. And sometimes they come up with something that is 90% right, lacks that 10% nuance. And sometimes the difference between wild success and failure is that 10% extra. And so being an editor can be very, very powerful, just by adding that extra 10% that was originally missing.
Do you remember developing a product or being in a situation where you created something that you thought was incredibly fun and amazing, and then you put it in front of a customer or somebody? Do you remember experience like that and getting totally different feedback?
Right in this, in ChuckECheese, we thought that it'd be fun to encourage people to bust their own tables. So we created Munch the Paper Eater, which was a vacuum that you'd hold a napkin in front and it'd suck it in and say, Mum, Munch loves paper, you know. And then we decided to take it one step further. And we made a big coin slot so you could roll the pizza tin in and it'd give you a token. We thought, okay, we'll give them a token to bust their own table. Well, what happened is the kids and sometimes the parents would be in playing games and leave pizza on the table. Other kids would come and grab the pizza tin, leave their unused pizza on the table to get the token. It just turned out to be a disaster. So sounded like a good idea, but in actuality, it didn't work.
Actually sounds really fun. You talked about people having good ideas, but maybe not being able to know what to do with them. And I think this is one thing that you're really recognized for is obviously you didn't invent games, but you really did invent the commercialization of games. And now as we think about all of, the different areas that the people play games and how they make money, how do I take an idea that I have and actually how important is it to figure out the business model early on or figure out how I'm going to commercialize an idea? How did you figure out how to take this thing that wasn't commercialized and then build a business model around it?
Well, I've told people that the video game really was a series of happy accidents. Happy accident one, I was a ham radio operator when I was 10, 11, and those radios were very expensive. And so I had to figure out a way to make adult money as a kid. And I did that through repairing televisions. I was always kind of handy that way. And so I understood TV, repair and TV really good. Second, I put myself through college working in an amusement park. And so I became manager and had 2 arcades that reported to me, so I understood the economics of the coin-operated game business, how much they had to earn, how much they cost, what have you. Happy accident 2. Happy accident 3, went to school at the University of Utah. Dr. Evans, who later went on and founded Evans and Sullivan, was one of the only guys that was hooking video screens up to big computers. And I played Space War. And I said, if I had this monitor in my arcade at the amusement park and put a coin slot on it, people would put money in.
You just because of these experiences you had, you knew it would.
I knew it would work.
It would do well.
But then you take 25 cents for 3 minutes and divide it into $1 million computer, and the math doesn't work. But I filed it away. And then I guess the next happy accident was I went to work at Ampex, where I really learned digital logic and video synthesis. And how do you take a bunch of chips and put an image on the screen? Learned that at Ampex.
And then you're kind of in this place and time where all these things had this opportunity to kind of converge.
Yeah, an MSI chip went from $2 a piece to 20 cents.
Wow.
And so all of a sudden the economics work.
One of the things about Atari that's really in every company still in Silicon Valley is this idea, some of these ideas around culture, around sort of employee first, limited management structure, open environment. Where did these things come from? When you started the company, did you say, hey, we really want to do these things, or the things you figured out along the way? I mean, it was a very different way of working that now seems very normal.
I was heavily influenced with the hippie movement. And I think that we decided that we didn't want to have a normal company. And so I looked at it and I said, what's the essence of running a good company? And it came down to outcomes. Can you get more outcome with less input? That's an engineer mind, you know. And so I said, is process a help or hurt? And should we elevate merit and outcomes above everything else? And the answer came back, yeah. Merit and outcomes. Do I care how somebody does something? No. I care about the end result. And there was an interesting thing about that is it actually burdens the manager because the manager needs to be clear about his expectations and the process. And once the expectations are clear, then whether the person does it fast or slow, you know, in the morning or in the evening, wearing a bathing suit or a tuxedo, none of that matters.
Doesn't matter.
And so what it kind of does is it cuts through noise. And anytime you can have a better signal noise ratio, you have a better company.
It's sort of obvious to hear somebody say it. It's much harder to actually to do.
Oh yeah. Even for me, sometimes I find myself lapsing into lazier programs, you know, and sometimes it's just easier to not focus that much.
And another thing that you did is really empowering engineers, which in the age of AI, we see just incredible things that are
Yeah.
happening with engineers. But you were,
And you ain't seen nothing yet.
tell us about it.
Well, think of the difference between horse and buggy and the steam locomotive. What we're talking about is tools change the world. And I think that AI and robotics and self-driving cars are going to so profoundly and inexorably change the way the world works. And it's happening within the next 5 years. And that's an eye blink for societies to morph and adapt. So there's a wonderful economist, Joseph Schopenhauer, and he always talked about how the nature of capitalism is creative destruction. That the buggy whip manufacturer goes out of business because of the car, you know, so buggy whips destroyed. Telephone operators, 80% gone, 90% gone because of dial telephones. You know, all these kinds of things are highly disruptive. But now you know, I can remember the days when a long distance telephone call to Europe was very expensive.
Yeah.
Now you do it for nothing, you know? And so the question is right now, you've got kids. What do they need to know to be a successful adult 5 years from now? And the only answer I can come up with that I have any, you know, belief in is know as much as you can about AI. Get next to the change agent. Because then no matter what happens, you're going to know the font from which it spawns.
Yeah. I've seen.
Am I being a little esoteric here?
No, it's great. I've seen in my own company, you know, I've been working for 2 decades, and I have a way of working. And bringing in AI into that work, it's like learning a new language or something. It's completely different from what I'm used to.
Yeah, and disruptive in some ways,
Totally disruptive.
but also empowering in some ways. I've been playing around with it. In analyzing, I mean, people know me for ChuckECheese and Atari and E-Tech and that, but I've also done some real stinkers along the way, you know.
Well, you started about 24 companies.
I know. And a lot of people don't know that, you know, that's the wonderful thing. People remember your successes, but they don't remember your failures.
Yeah.
So it's like you get baptized, you get forgiven of your bad sins. But anyway, I just figured out that my successes were right time, right place, right people. My failures were wrong time, wrong place, wrong people. Okay, so if you have one idea, the only time is now. So I decided I needed to break that. So I do a small business plan, 2 or 3 pages. I look at customer, you know, just guesses, customer acquisition, a little bit of research, what have you. And I put it on the shelf. I call it my marinade pile. And I put as many of them up there as I can. These are ideas for businesses. And I let them marinate. And then, somewhere along the line, the time becomes right. A person becomes right. I meet somebody at a cocktail party and I said, that'd be a good CEO for this company. And so now I let the marinade pile talk to me rather than me talk to you.
Yeah, and if an idea, you know, everybody's creative in some way, and you can produce these ideas. I don't think there's kind of a unique set of people that really truly act on those things, and those are the entrepreneurs of the world. But if you put an idea on a shelf and then you keep thinking about it, and
Exactly.
you can't get it out of your system, you know, and sometimes it can be almost like a revelation, or I don't know, like when I left my job at EA originally, it was in the middle of the financial crisis in 2009, and it was a terrible time to quit your job to go to a startup of all things, but I couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had this negotiation with my wife about when is the best time to do it. I tried to convince her it was 6 weeks after our first son was born. And then, but I just said, you know, people around me said, what are you going to do? You don't even have it. I said, at least I'll be able to sleep. I can get this idea out, and then I can work on it all day, and then I can, you know, I can be at peace at night.
Right.
And I found over the years that some version of that, and there are other ideas that, like, I get out, I work on it for a little bit, put it on the shelf, and then this kind of disappears from my mind.
Yeah. I think ideas and people self-select. And I think that's a good thing.
You think the ideas select the people too, or?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, both. Well, what happens is success is as much driven by intensity and passion, you know, and if you have an idea that you're passionate about, that just increases the probability of success, you know?
Yeah, there is something when you really deeply care about it, when you think about it all the time, and with all the incredible things of AI, and maybe at some point in the near future, it replicates some of this, but I still don't feel like it's really even close to the creativity of a really engaged, passionate human.
Well, I don't think it's supposed to be right now. I think it's a way to refine. Like, I look at it as a good editor.
Yeah.
So, you know, when I've written a couple of books, and I started writing kind of as a joke, because, you know, I'm an engineer. Math and science I'm good at. Grammar and spelling, no way. But then I discovered it doesn't matter. As long as you can tell a good story, you've got editors that can take care of all that niggly bits. You know, you triggered my mind about something that I call preload. And what I found was really important at Atari and ChuckECheese and things is to talk to your people about what you're going to be working on 6 months or a year from now, in much detail as you can. And the way I explain it is, if I say that we're going to be building fire hydrants 6 months from now, by the time 6 months come, you're going to have noticed every fire hydrant in 10 city blocks. And you'll be a wizard at fire hydrants just because you preloaded that idea. And so when you preload an idea, what you're doing is you're saying, in your day-to-day awareness, you can see an article about what you're talking about. You can see an example. And all of a sudden, you're much more prepared because you've had 6 months of preloading. You know,
It's kind of like that saying that you're made up of the 5 people you spend your most time with. And the same thing around ideas, the things that you immerse yourself in, they sort of end up becoming part of who you are, as you're saying. And that could be anything, whatever, ideally something that you're passionate about. So you're willing to work on it
yeah.
till the middle of the night sometimes and kind of put all of your 110% of your creative energy into it.
I used to ask people, how many all-nighters have you spent on this? The answer is 0. I'd say, oh, you're not trying very hard.
Or you don't care.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's really not deeply inside you.
And I was trying to count how many all-nighters and
That you worked on Atari or
what have you, yeah. And I realized, you know what's one of the bigger drivers of all-nighters? Trade shows.
how so?
I once postulated that the fall of the Soviet Union came because they didn't have trade shows. because 90% of technical progress happens 48 hours prior to a trade show. Because the trade show is an immovable date.
Yes.
And you always want to put your best foot forward. And so 6 months from the trade show, you set these goals. And you're 2 days before, you want to have that accomplished. And you can either give up and say, well, that wasn't a good idea, or you can say, oh, damn it, let's get this thing done. It's just a little
I'm having a lot
exciting.
of sort of PTSD just thinking about the trade shows that I've had this exact experience with, especially in gaming.
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing that, I mean, there's some kind of an effect that goes on. If you walk on a trade show floor 1 hour before it opens, it's chaos. It's madness. And the minute the doors open, all of a sudden, pristine, perfect. How does that happen?
You've written this really interesting book, Shaping the Future of Education, the Exodexa Manifesto with Dr. Leah Haynes. But one of the things you talk about in the beginning is this sort of children that are left behind.
Yeah.
Who are these children?
There's many things. One, you've got 2 8-year-olds. One 8-year-old was raised in a house with a lot of stuff, a lot of resources, a lot of books, a lot of magazines, what have you. 8-year-old, sparse, no books, maybe a television, that's it. And so when school comes along, one of the things that's bad about school is it, by its nature, is competitive. And it shouldn't be. You should be matched against your previous self. And I think that by gamifying education and by having the tools of both AI and computers and screen time, that we can individualize education in a powerful way. And I think that it's going to help most the 8-year-old that has been deprived of a rich experience. And when I say rich, it doesn't need to be financially rich, it just has to be rich in stuff. You know, I believe every 3-year-old should have a glue gun.
Why is that?
You can stick anything to anything. But the mother says, oh, he's going to burn himself. And I say, yeah, then they'll learn not to.
Yeah.
And so when you can stick anything to anything, that's the definition of synthesis. Building is really almost as important as learning.
What do you mean by that?
I think that when you build something, you're creating something that previously didn't exist into something that now exists. And I think that you want to always lubricate your mind, not into what is, but what is possible. That's why I think reading science fiction is valuable. It alerts you to the world that can be as opposed to what is. And I think that's important.
The education system today is sort of a one size must fit everyone kind of experience. One of the great things about games is that, especially modern games, is you're usually in an open world and you can kind of go and do the things that are interesting to you and are most beneficial to you. And from an education standpoint, some of the things that you've talked about, how do you see games? A lot of people have this, it's almost like negative stigma about games as some sort of waste of time or something. But how can games be used as a really positive way to educate kids and get them excited about learning?
Well, when you talk about movies, what are you talking about? You're talking about post-apocalyptic, you're talking about, Armageddon, or you're talking about a Western, it's a broad spectrum. So I think the same thing, you can't talk about games as any kind of homogeneous nature, highly disparate. But we know the brain remembers more of what you do, 10% of what you read, 90% of what you do. Games can require you to do something every 3 to 5 seconds. And so then you say the question, okay, what are they doing? Well, are they solving problems? Are they learning something? Are they experiencing a synthetic life? Is there context to what they're doing? Like learning something with context, so much more valuable than just abstract knowledge. And, if you look at what people didn't like throughout ages, there was a phrase called a bookworm. That's somebody that read too much. Now, you heard that ever? Too many. Oh, he's reading too many books.
He got sick. What happened? He read too much.
He read too much. And then there was television. And they said, oh, people watch too much television. Then you talk about Sesame Street, and they said, oh, I learned so much from Sesame Street.
Yeah.
And then, there are a lot of movies that I can remember because I was the nerd projectionist in my 6th grade class, you know, that we used to watch movies that were educational content. Okay, so why not games? You know, and Exodexa is building a game that for middle school that you play the game and you learn everything that the SAT wants you to.
It's a really big idea. And as I have a middle schooler and elementary school kids and a high schooler. And, we, as somebody that's in Silicon Valley, we have sort of strict rules about what they're able to do with the phone and trying to like make sure that, they're not glued to it all the time. And one of the things my middle schooler, my high schooler always tell me is, oh, so-and-so is playing games all through class. I was like, well, how would he even, he's like, well, he's got under his book, and it's right on his phone. And as I was reading some of the thoughts you had and some of these ideas, it's like, what a big idea that you could actually turn the class into a game. You could turn the learning into this thing that right now kids are kind of, they'll get in big trouble. They'll lose their phones if they get caught playing a game in class.
But see, what people don't realize is that production values are really important. And an immature mind often can't distinguish the difference between a well-produced, well-created, bad idea versus a poorly produced, poorly executed, good idea. So contrast a cigarette commercial that probably cost $1 million a minute to produce, and a teacher with a piece of chalk that's talking about Shakespeare's Henry V. Bad idea, well produced. Good idea, poorly produced. So what we really want to do is increase the production values of good content. It's an attention war.
How does mentorship factor in to an education experience? How important are mentors or people trying to learn and grow?
Mentors are really important. A couple of reasons. First of all, a good mentor is somebody that the person respects and wants to emulate. Second, a mentor has some resonance with the child. What is resonance really? There is communication gap, and it can be a difference in vocabulary, difference in dialect, of course, difference in language. But the real thing is that when you have these differences, a good mentor can decrease the signal-to-noise ratio, which is, whenever you're having a communication, you want to have as low a signal-to-noise ratio as you can. That's why on airplanes, noise-canceling headphones are really important, because you get rid of the noise, and that's just better communication. It's good. It's better brain science.
How can we teach kids to be more optimistic and curious?
Games. Optimism is harder. Curiosity is sometimes innate, sometimes it's not. But what you really want to do is have a series of experiences And the most important one is actually rigor and you know, tenacity. And I think games are good at that because you play a game, you lose. You play it again, you get better, still lose. Play it again, you get better, you still lose. But somewhere along the line, you get good enough and you win.
Yeah.
And I talk a lot about the state of flow. You know, Mihai's big treatise from the University of Chicago. And flow is not too hard, not too easy, just right. And that's why in games, we have levels. Because as you gain skill, in order to keep you in the state of flow, we have to increase the difficulty because you've gotten good, but not quite good enough. And so we keep you sucked in by constantly upping the ante as you progress in your skill set.
I think I've heard you say, yeah, easy to play,
Hard
hard to master.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of lessons in that.
Yeah.
Where does Exodexa go if it's successful? What do you hope to achieve from it? What is the end goal for you?
I believe that education, no matter how good we are, we're going to probably be at 70% of where it could be. So I don't see an end point. You know, I see change, I see continual improvement, and I see there's some very interesting things. Virtual reality, how our games are currently 2D, but I know that some of them are going to be more powerful in 3D, in a virtual environment. And then you ask yourself the question, let's add some more senses. Like there was a study done by Columbia University, 30 years ago. And they called it the scent test. And what they had is a series of graduate students that when they were studying math, they would suck on a toothpick that was cinnamon. When they were studying history, they'd suck on a toothpick that had spearmint on it. So each subject they had it associated with a scent. And then when they had tests, if you were getting the test in math, you suck on a cinnamon stick, and increased their outcomes on tests by 30 or 40%, significant. The only difference was smell. So, now, this sounds stupid, but can our games integrate smell to increase efficacy?
You have 8 kids. I don't know if there was something in the Clearfield, Utah tap water, or that pushed you to have 8 kids. I have 4. I feel like I'm a half Nolan. What advice do you have for me with raising young kids and making the most?
I think a father needs to really, really help the transition from unconditional love to conditional love. And, moms have unconditional love. No matter how you screw up, they still love you. Dads have to say, I love you. If you screw up, I'm going to be very unhappy. And I think that fathers need to set guidelines and teach kids about interacting with the wider world who doesn't care about you at all. and will punish you drastically for missteps. And they have to understand that. And I think that there's a lot of things that being a man is hard in today's world. You know, I think girls have it a little bit easier. We always had to, you know, be the aggressor, you know, had to ask, and therefore it got turned down. I mean, I can remember we used to have dances, you know, in the gym, and all the boys would be on one side of the gym and all the girls on the other side. And that death watch of walking across the gym to the girls' side to ask somebody to dance. And if you got turned down, then the walk of shame back. Those are tough things. You know, you gotta really up your game if you're gonna be a guy.
My 14-year-old son 2 weeks ago had this experience for the first time, and it was shocking to me how just life repeats. The exact same thing you just described, and then, you know, there was this moment where some kids lifted him up and he crowd surfed, and he felt like, you know, he was on top of the world.
Yeah.
It went from that feeling of just, you know, emptiness in your stomach and fear to like, hey, I can do this. And I think what you're saying resonates with me, that fathers, it's like talked about the AI being a sparring partner, but in some ways for your kids, like trying to help them just get ready and trained for when they're going to be making 100% of their decisions and be on their own, that they're in a place where they can, you know, face the world that's going to hit them like a really big wave.
You know, I did a couple of things that I think were really good. One, I would take one of the kids out for breakfast every Sunday, just one of them. And I would choose a place that was at least a half hour away. So that car time was where we kind of did the interview and, hey, how's your life and what have you. And I'd try to take them to a weird place for breakfast, like, you know, a wharf where they were coming in from the fishing fleets, you know, because we were in Woodside at the time. And so, you know, up in the San Francisco wharf area, or Oakland at the Lawrence Hall of Science and that sort of thing. And then I'd spoil them a little bit. The next thing I'd do is when they turned 10, I'd take them on a business trip with me domestically. At 12, I'd take them to Europe with me on a business trip, just one. 14, I'd take them to Asia. And, you know, to give you some context to that, I was driving my kids to school one day and I was listening to talk, and my son was asked, hey, what was the best day of your life? He said, oh, that's easy. It's when I was in Tokyo with my dad. Cheers.
On a business trip.
On a business trip.
You've had these legendary business accomplishments, and a lot of this time we spent talking about your kids. I wonder, like,
Well, that's the most important.
Well, as you stack rank some of these things, and as you think about, you know, what matters to you now in, you know, in your 80s, like, where do you put these different things on a map of
well,
how
now
you value them or
now
appreciate
now I get to add in grandkids,
yeah.
and that's also fun. And what I find is that my kids are so much more strict with their grandkids than I was, as I remember. So
You're kind of notoriously known as a pretty loose, fun guy, right? So maybe
Right.
that makes sense.
So they, when they come to stay with us, they think, okay, we're going to have fun because Grandpa lets me do stuff, and he has candy in his office.
I could see kids being excited to have Nolan Bushnell as their grandfather.
Yeah, they are. They like it a lot.
Outside of family, who's the person you most admire?
Well, I had two mentors that were very important to me. One was my boss at Lagoon, you know,
The amusement park.
at the amusement park. I always felt that he gave me the foundation of good business sense. The second one was a guy named Bob Noyce, one of the founders of Intel. And he was a mentor, and we used to play chess together. And he would give me, you know, I was probably one of the youngest executives in Silicon Valley, and he was very important to me. I think my third grade teacher, Miss Cook, was a very important person. Today, there's a guy on YouTube that I can't say I like him, but I really respect his way of analyzing things. His name's Peter Zahan. And he's a global strategist, and I kind of like the way he thinks.
If you could implant an idea into everyone in the world, what would it be?
Kind of like Nike, just do it. Do it. Always do. You know, get up and be active. Make it happen.
What's the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?
Oh, well. One thing. I think getting the motion circuits right on the very first video game was a problem. Like, I can't think of another problem that's taken me a month to solve. And it was the logic problem, and gates, OR gates, what have you, flip-flops. And it was decisively difficult.
What's your best advice for overcoming difficult things?
Relentlessness. Just keep at it. And sleep on it. We know that our subconscious can process more variables than our front mind. So sleeping on things often helps you solve things.
What accomplishment are you most proud of?
My kids.
If when you die you meet God, what do you hope he says to you?
You played a good game.
What's the biggest impact you want to make in the world?
I would really like to accelerate education in the world. I would really like to make learning fun and efficient, And I think that if I could create an educational program or process in which a kid never, ever, ever feels bored or frustrated while learning, I think that would be a great accomplishment.
And how do you measure your life?
I think I've had more fun than anybody. But now, the tricky part of that is, how do you define fun? Fun is playing a good game. Fun is having a great family. Fun is sitting down to a wonderful Thanksgiving dinner with friends and family.
Nolan, thank you so much.
Good fun.
Good to see you.
Divot.
On next week's episode.
And I tell other early entrepreneurs all the time, gosh, I know what you're doing right now is really hard, but please look around. Enjoy the experience. You're doing something that very few people get to experience.